Hi, thanks for joining me. Peter Saville is arguably the best known, most successful, and highly acclaimed psychologist within the business psychology profession. With the usage of some 50 million of his measures of ability, personality, motivation, and talent annually, Peter has been described as one of the most influential psychologists of our time. He co-founded SHL in 1977, where he developed the Occupational Personality Questionnaire, the OPQ, which was the first big commercial Big Five personality measure. Later on, he floated SHL on the London Stock Exchange. After the successful float of SHL, Peter went on to found Saville Consulting, which is now Saville Assessment, where he developed the Saville Wave Questionnaire, and the company was acquired by Willis Towers Watson in 2015. Perhaps a glutton for punishment, it seems, Peter has since gone on to launch an exciting new venture, 10x Psychology. Not only that, he has a new book out on the way called Testing Times, Psychologist at Work, and that's going to be published soon. Okay, let's get into it. Hi, Peter. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Hi, Ben. Good to meet up with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be diving into all sorts of stuff. But before we begin, I have to say, you're responsible for me seeing a large part of my country, Australia. So most people know Australia's pretty huge. And if you live in Sydney, you don't really go to Perth. And if you're in Perth, you don't really go to Sydney, maybe for a holiday once upon a time. But I got sent around doing assessments with SHL, OPQ assessments all around the country. So Queensland, Brisbane, Hobart, the West, all sorts of places. So I want to say thank you for letting me tour my own country.
Oh, that's good. In fact, I'm not just saying this, in the running courses down in Australia, which I did in Melbourne, mainly Sydney, but also I think as well in Brisbane, were some of the most enjoyable courses. They were really good fun. The people on the courses were good fun. So you're being paid, to train them in the OPQ. And
yeah. I remember doing, I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, however many days it was, we had a great time. We learnt a lot, but we had a lot of love. We're going to talk about the book later as well, but I know in the book there's some great stories of you giving talks and doing some training sessions. I think it was Trinidad and then also in the Netherlands somewhere. So some feisty stuff going on. But for people who may not know the full story, maybe we could take it back and look at Saville Holdsworth. So can you tell us the backstory to that? So starting with Roger Holdsworth and then the way you developed the product lines and the services, what other bits and pieces.
What happened, I should make clear, was that I joined the National Foundation for Education Research test division, right, which had a monopoly of all tests, and not at the time, virtually complete monopoly. And I got fortunately promoted through to chief psychologist at the test division. So I was covering educational, clinical and occupational testing, but I learnt my trade there for 7 years. Wow. But I was increasingly being asked to run courses on selection testing by organizations like BP, Mars, Whitbread and so on. And that was allowed in my contract. So if I took holiday, I actually earned the fee. And it was in the NFER's time, I had half the fee. So that was going on and on, more and more. And there were 5-day courses and then 5-day courses in a personality measurement. And this income was building up and up and up and up. And then a management consultancy in High Wycombe called HGS Management Consultants offered me the opportunity of forming a company where they would fund it, but they had 51%. Or I could go out on my own because I'd already built up a sales platform. So actually, it was accidental. I went to Roger for advice, a careers advice, to say, well, I've had this offer from HGS. Dr. Bill Barry was HR director, I think, of British Airways at one stage. Now unfortunately passed away. And then, or I could go out on my own. And then he made a counter offer and said, well, perhaps we should form a company together, but really just in test publishing. So you have all of your training and the consultancy work you're doing. That's why he offered 65% shares in my favor. And I went away and I was still doing work, running courses, and I did a big validation study on pub managers, looking at the qualities of people that tend to succeed versus fail. And it wasn't until much later that year that I decided in about the September of 1977 that I would go with Roger rather than be on my own or go with HTS Management Consultancy.
Big decision.
It was a big decision, and it took me quite a few months. Went away on holiday to Bournemouth, glorious summer that year, and thought over it. And Roger was so good on accounts, structure, knew about company formations and registering for, taxations, VAT and all that sort of thing, which was not my scene. I decided that I would join up with him. And initially, all the training work of the agreement would come in that I did came into me. All the consultancy I did would come into me because Roger mainly did individual assessments. He assessed people, then write up the reports. Yeah. But after a year, the company had flown, done so well. He came along and said, "Well, can I buy, go 50-50?" So I sold him 15% of the shares for £15. Probably the stupid thing I ever did, because the accountant said, "You've made such a profit in your first year.
Wow,
that they're worth an awful lot more."
Wow. How much did they buy Alaska for? Was that $1?
It was £15. It was £1 a share. So
no, yeah, I just think it's yeah. But anyway, it didn't matter.
It doesn't matter because the company may not have gone as well because we were not socially close. Because he was part of the Armitage family, Armitage Shanks. Yeah. His father was a High Court judge, and he was Marlborough to Cambridge. And I was brought up in the rough end of Wembley in northwest London. So we're very different social background, but I think we're quite a good team, effectively. So I got more involved in the product development. More involved in training because I enjoyed that. He less so, but he was very good at the structure. But he was a good psychologist as well, and strangely a bit more in terms of the academic work and the test development. So really together, it worked well effectively.
That's great. That's great. And how did you get the balance between developing products or actual assessments versus consulting work? And then how did that shift over time?
Well, when I was away running courses, perhaps I might be away for a week, leave on a Sunday. You start on a Sunday evening. Many evenings I was working on test construction, having run the course during the day. I was writing items and so on then. Then if I had a week spare between two courses, we were writing items and tests. Someone from the NFER joined me, one of the psychologists there to help in that development. I decided to actually look at three main areas, and that was graduate and management selection, at, if you like, clerical staff and office space selection, and have a battery for that. And thirdly, a very big area at the time was apprentice selection.
Mechanical comprehension.
Yeah, that's right, mechanical comprehension. And they were using American tests, and they tested 150,000 applicants a year. Ooh. So I went down to Croydon to see David Matthews, and he agreed to come over to our new test immediately. So we were selling 150,000 answer sheets of pencil and paper then, immediately to him, overnight.
Wow.
Then I saw the Construction Industry Training Board, and they came over, because again, they were using American tests. And we also, of course, I decided that we had a bit of an argument over this with Roger and myself. I wanted to publish in colour to make them look different.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this. And I think you got your brother involved, right?
My brother was director of design in the stationery office, which I think is the biggest publisher in the country, because they publish Hansard.
Parliamentary book, yeah.
So he was director of design, and he came up with our first test battery design, which is that.
Oh, wow.
And we had, this is all pencil and paper. It's someone found this in a skip, by the way, that had been thrown up, with booklets and answer sheets, and I did it all in colour, administration cards for the administrator. I used acetate keys, not horrible paper keys, and then a manual with the norm line we send out every so often. And many, I remember the HR director of Mars Confectionery saying, "Peter, using this stuff we got now, which looks like it's come from the 1800s, it's a poor advertisement for our company."
Yeah.
So, we don't care what you charge for the materials if it looks relevant, because in fact that gives us an advantage in the competition between good graduate selection, to get good graduates.
So there was an increased production cost to come up with the better branding and
quite
packaging.
minor doing it in colour. I mean, very often it's just one colour.
Yeah.
Made it more difficult to photocopy as well. So
yeah.
But although most people did not do that because they didn't really, we could then withdraw their license, we found out. So photocopying wasn't a great problem. Yeah. But I don't think people realised at the time that the materials that companies use is a reflection of that company.
Mm.
Just like if I went to a bad interview as a graduate looking for a job, I remember once the guy fell asleep on me because he had a bottle of wine at lunchtime. Well, I wasn't that. I was arrogant enough to think, well, if that's the way you go about your interviewing, I don't particularly want to work for you, effectively. So, so the idea that it was all in colour, and also, frankly, the quality of the training, we took people right through norms, correlation, reliability, validity, right through to utility analysis for 5 days. Meant they often got through what would now be their CIPD exams. Because the stats was taught in a way which was different, and that was very useful in their general qualification.
Can I ask about the actual marketing of the business? Because if I'm correct in thinking, there were some concerns that you guys were, being a bit salesy in an area that was supposed to be clean cut, pure data only.
When I was on the test standards committee of the BPS at the time, the National Institute of Industrial Psychology had existed since the 1920s, but they got massively out of date, effectively. So when we produced a catalogue, a brochure, saying that we did this sort of work, like assessments and testing and courses, I remember the then director of the NIP, as it went broke, said, we're not in trade, so it did cause some concern amongst the older generation, but not amongst the younger generation of psychologists.
Right. And how did you get in with the big companies?
Mainly by recommendation. I mean, I remember, for example, one of our clients was BP. The HR director was reading the Times on his way into the city, and opposite were two people from another company, a very big insurance company indeed, who were talking about the problem of finding managers around the country who were the best, because they knew that the appraisal system wasn't perfect. So Peter Dodgson put his Times down and said, "Excuse me, I know a company, a guy that's helped us in this area with assessment centres. Why don't you come for lunch at Britannic House in London and meet him?" And I did. They then got me to meet the chairman of the company, and he immediately ordered about 20 5-day assessment centres. So a lot of it was through recommendation.
Brilliant.
It was really recommendation, especially from the courses.
Yeah.
And of course, it also meant from the courses that when we went out with new tests, they trialled them for us. So, and if you get involved in trialing, you normally use those materials. Yeah. And they gave us feedback on what we should and shouldn't do and what they should look like. And being on the courses, I enjoyed running them, but I was getting a lot of information from my own clients about what they will be, they need to be short, job relevant, etc. So I was getting marketing information when I was running the courses, which they were paying me for.
Yeah. There's a lesson in that for everyone listening to this, I think, isn't it?
Networking, but it wasn't deliberate networking.
Yeah.
They became personal friends. And when I did resign from the NFER, the phone didn't stop ringing, with people offering jobs, for projects to be done, because they wanted to keep us alive as a company, because the only other alternatives were, they weren't there. It was brilliant. From really those courses starting in 1974, when I was NFER, you were getting better and better known. And when I did go out on my own, for those few months I wasn't with Roger until we formed SHL, I was getting lots of courses and project work to do effectively.
Yeah, right. And then it became an overnight success after all those years of plugging away.
Profit, it just flew.
Yeah, brilliant.
And
Actually,
we funded the test development through the actual training course income.
I was just going to ask about the funding and development of the OPQ itself, the Occupational Personality Questionnaire, because that was quite an innovative way to come up with a new product line.
I remember
Can you tell us about that?
Bain and Co. coming over.
Bain and Co. Yeah.
We went over to the Albert pub just for a pint, and he said, I said, what we've done, we've gone out and we've asked people to sponsor the development for so many £1,000s a year, and in return, they'll get a free training in the instrument and won't have to pay any license fee. But they've also done all the trialing for us. And he said, who thought that one up? So, in fact, the OPQ was done at no cost to us, the development.
Genius.
It took 4 years. And we had regular meetings in London with about 100 people there explaining where we had got to. They did the trialing. We went through about 3 or 4 trialing stages. And then we produced it. And of course, they immediately became clients.
Brilliant.
So we switched from the 16PS over to the OPQ.
Would you recommend that as a method to the companies that are looking to develop new service lines or products?
I don't think I get away with it now.
No? Because I hear it called as pre-selling. I hear it called pre-selling, where you're getting people in, as in the tech world, they call it beta testers, right? And special rates and all that kind of thing.
Perhaps so. I mean, I'm not really into sales that much. It was just a client suggesting that if you had a licensing fee, they could go to their finance director and actually say, if we get in now, basically we won't have to pay this fee for 5 years. Then what happened was, as soon as, let's say Sainsbury's came in, then immediately Tesco came in. So I expected to get 10 clients sponsoring, and we ended up with over 50. That's
that FOMO, fear of missing out thing, is it?
Yeah, it probably was. Yeah, it probably worked to our advantage.
Brilliant. So you had the assessments, you had consulting work, training. I found it interesting that you decided to go the next step beyond that, which was Woodstock House, which is the SHL Management Centre. Can you tell us why you did that?
Cool that. And the problem was we were training sometimes 16 people, 10 courses a week.
Wow.
So I remember Charles Handy, I was talking in Ireland, coming up to me and said, you've got it right, haven't you? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I go out and give a talk and I charge for it, but you've got about 30 people around the world running your same course. So he said, I'm supposed to be the management guru. He's a good guy. But no, we got to a situation that we were using up all the rooms for the local hotels, and there was nowhere we didn't have enough room locally to actually to house them. So this offer came up to acquire the Boilermakers Unions Training Centre, which had been left deserted for a year. It was in a terrible state.
So Boilermakers, did you say?
The Boilermakers Union.
Brilliant.
And I negotiated with them that we would rent it, but any improvements we would make, they would pay for it, half of it with us, plus RPI, right? So I said, right, I want to add 2 tennis courts with Fudlet. I want to add a little golf course around it. We want to do some extra buildings. And they were so desperate to agree to it, to get it off their hands. They agreed to all these additions. So I realized that when you run a management course, it's not just a good course content. I was pretty fed up with people complaining about the bad food or people not understanding courses.
Yeah.
So we also did not actually take people from outside to actually do the catering. We took on their own chefs to do it. But people pre-ordered, so we had virtually no wastage. So basically we give a very high quality food, which everybody raved about. I think they came back for the food more than the actual course, quite frankly. So having run courses so much in hotels, I knew exactly I felt what I wanted in that place. And that was one of my joys actually, was overseeing the development of it.
Yeah.
Then I was actually in Australia
Oh,
when
yeah.
I got a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, and Roger Holdsworth was on the line saying, we've had a phone call saying that the union now owe us more than we owe them. Will we buy it from them?
Ah.
And I said, what are they asking? He said, £5 million. I said, £1 million. They signed for £1 million. So we acquired 10 acres of prime Surrey site for £1 million. And we had our own management centre. That meant people could visit us and gave us more status.
Absolutely.
Because, we had a lovely restaurant, very good food. They can come down and see that. We have meetings there, which saves time, as well as all the course delegates. You could also go up there at lunchtime and walk around and say hello to your delegates, which are all your customers.
Yep.
If you wasn't, and I enjoy courses so much, I was running them when I was still chairman of the company.
Really?
Yeah, and I'd often go up there on a Sunday night and have a pint or something with a few friends and meet the delegates there that had seen it. And another important point: many of our clients were women, and hotels, if they're in the room on their own, they can't go in the bar. Yeah, it's difficult for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because at our centre, they felt easy to come back without being harassed by anybody.
Yeah.
That was, I think, another important thing.
Which strengthens the learning. If it's an internal corporate event, then you're only strengthening networks within that business. And if it's a multi-company event, there's going to be networking going on, isn't there?
You deliberately made the courses quite difficult, and had a test at the end of it with a certificate, and so it was quite tough. But we actually coached them through the course. It was open book. So by setting it at about the 75th percentile, if you like, they felt they'd actually really achieved something.
That's good.
So they left there. And it meant that later on, when other companies would come in and try and sell tests to our delegates, they knew more than the salespeople. Yeah. In fact, I heard that after I left SHL, one salesperson had gone in and said, I'm with SHL. And the guy said, well, Peter Saville trained me. And there was a salesperson from SHL. And she said, who's Peter Saville?
Oh, wow.
So unfortunately, she was shown the door.
Well, you can only blame the induction or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. And on the management center, I just love the fact that you're negotiating with unions because, pardon my French, I got screwed over many times by unions in my time. So
then I'd add something else.
Yeah.
We were about to sign, then I add something else. Then I add something else. Well, now I want a gym. We add something else. It was great fun negotiating with the union the other way around.
Brilliant. I went on a harbour cruise once with a shop assistants union Christmas party, and they were throwing the money around, and their poor shop assistants were being paid pittances, but the union had a great time. Can I move to the tricky area of acquisitions and exit strategies? Because if you're listening to this, make sure you get Peter's book because there's some amazing stuff that goes on. But there are a few things. One is the purchase of Landy & Jacobs in the USA, so an assessment company. I'm curious as to why you bought that. And then also the eventual flotation of SHL. Can you give us some background to some of that stuff?
Yeah, well, Frank Landy was president of SIOP, of course. He had a great intellect, and he later, and so did Rick Jacobs, for that matter. In fact, Rick has been in contact with me recently. But Frank then went into litigation psychology work, where he charged a great deal of money to work as an expert witness on the fairness of election procedures.
Oh, right.
I think he looked at the problem of one of the big pizza places, which paid their delivery guys in the speed they got there, to the destination, but they were knocking people over and killing them.
Wow.
And he argued that was not a good way of paying their delivery drivers. This is a massive case. So he's involved in a number of class actions. So he was based in New York. I was bringing him out to Barbados because he said he was good at baseball and he said he'd be good at cricket. So I found a local guy who bowled about 90 miles an hour with a cricket ball coming off a building site, and he wouldn't have had any pads on or any protective heading, and wouldn't have realised that the ball in cricket, hits hard.
It'll break something.
It would have killed him. I could not have done that to him. But unfortunately, he became ill, and his partner then was a New Zealander, and that was back when they had the World Cup finals in about 2004.
Oh yeah,
in Bridgetown in Barbados. So, but I'm sure he was good at hitting a baseball, but in cricket, when it's hitting and coming up into your face and everything else, and when I did a talk in New York to the Metro group and I showed them threw a cricket ball at them, they couldn't believe how hard it was. It's a lethal weapon, is it not?
It's brilliant. Yeah. I've had some people accuse me of saying that it's a lethal weapon also in the sense that it can bore them to death, but I play cricket, I love it, so I don't talk to those people anymore.
One of the people in Barbados said to me, she said, one of my mates, she said, the game of glorious uncertainty. It's so true. It could be so boring. Then all of a sudden, people are knocking sixes all over the place, and it completely changes.
Yeah.
So I like to have it on the test match, and just have it on in the background. Then all of a sudden, someone like Ben Stokes comes in. But knocks people all over the place. Or as you discussed, the both of them Ashes.
Yeah.
When both of them came in,
we don't need to go there, Peter. We don't need to go there.
Okay.
I did see Ian Botham smash us around in Perth once upon a time as well, so he got around.
Yeah. We stopped the course to watch that because that was just incredible.
I love it. Yeah, that's good. So what about the trickier side of the flotation? Because many businesses think, oh, wow, we're going to sell to a big competitor one day, or we're going to float. And it's not all very clear and skittles.
Roger was very keen on floating the company because I was not, frankly. I was very happy as it was. It was making very good profits. Exit strategy wasn't apparent to me. But the decision was made that a lot of the long-term, very good people should make a return for the work they put into the company, not just Roger and myself. So we sold half our shares for 8p each, which then floated at about £2.40.
Wow.
So we gave away effectively half our shares in about 1992 in a restructure. But Roger was very keen to get on the stock exchange, and I didn't realize what that meant. That meant the accountants came in, the lawyers came in, the bureaucracy came in. To float a company costs millions. They look at every single detail.
Yeah.
And then when you are a PLC, the amount of bureaucracy is incredible, and it's just not me.
Yeah. Before you go on to that, because you mentioned in your book about a book called A Man's Search for Meaning. And it's funny because about 2 weeks ago, I finished reading it, an amazing book by Viktor Frankl. I don't know if it's 50 years old now. Wonderful book. But in your book, can I read something to you and get your thoughts on it? So,
yeah, please do.
Brilliant. One of our directors, Dr. Sue Henley, a chartered clinical psychologist, firmly believed that floating SHL was another bereavement for me. My work had changed as we ran up to the flotation of SHL, from technical and entrepreneurial to an administrative role as a PLC chairman, for which I was manifestly not suited. I had helped develop the OPQ, many of SHL's ability tests and major courses. Now I was surrounded by bumbling bureaucrats sitting on silly committees. I felt of no worth and almost certainly suffered from identity loss. That's a huge thing. So I was reading Man's Search for Meaning recently, and identity loss from a business. Can you tell me about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I've had an aversion to forms, and someone said, well, you made your fortune out of forms. Ken Alexander, if you know, is an Australian that ran our Australian outfit.
Yeah.
Said, your book is written the way you ran SHL, feisty, and actually completely intolerant of any bureaucracy. Of going in, will you stop having meetings, for about 5 hours, 20 of you? Yeah, just get on with it. Yeah, get a smaller group together. Let's discuss it. What we might do. Because meetings were set up about meetings. It was going on and on and on and on. But you have to go through all this procedure when you float a company. You have to, as a PLC, of course, you're responsible to all the shareholders. You're always concerned about your interims every 3 months, which sometimes means long-term planning. If you want to do a validation study, which is quite expensive, but is longitudinal, because you had an academic interest, but it also improves the product. They're showing that you've got good validity across time. You've got to explain all that, the most obvious things. And I was finding that for good intentioned people coming on as non-executive directors, I met Nigel McGinley, who was the CEO of the TIRAC here recently, and he agreed to come in 4 times a year, 4 days a year, and make decisions about strategy of a company which is so niche.
4 days a year.
It's not possible. It's not possible. So I found that decisions were being made at so-called strategy level when there was no experience of working on the shop floor. So they even decided to print in black and white.
Oh, wow.
And just to save a few pence, when we were basically, got so much profit margin in there, it made our test no different to anybody else's. To cut courses down from 5 days to just 1 or 2, or even suggested no training at all. Well, that was the barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Effectively, and our clients felt so well trained, but that they wouldn't go anywhere else. So I just fundamentally disagreed. There was an EGM. They wanted to get rid of Roger, particularly because they felt he was interfering. But I would not vote against my partner, and we just lost that EGM. And but they came back to my house 2 or 3 times to ask me to go back, effectively. But I said, no, if you wouldn't listen to me before, why should you listen now? And I was particularly concerned about cheating on the internet.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's a major concern of mine that, people, you didn't know who was actually completing a test when we went on. Actually, to be floating at the time of going onto the internet was not a good time, because it was in its infancy then.
Yeah. So that was a very stressful period, I imagine.
It was.
How did you deal with that? And then is that what led you into the formation of Saville Consulting, which is now Saville Assessment?
They asked me back and came to my house and made various nice offers. But I couldn't work for other people for so long. But I thought, no, I'd rather start again. And quite a lot of people that were at Saville SHL rejoined me. So I started that company, developed the WAVE questionnaire.
Yes.
And then after 10 years, Towers Watson came along with an offer I couldn't refuse. All the directors were shareholders, also wanted to take it. So I sold that company and moved on again.
How long? What was that time period from starting to leaving?
I think we formed Saville Consulting, now Saville Assessment, in 2004, and we sold it about 2016 to Towers Watson. It's now Willis Towers Watson.
Yes, yeah.
They're a very good company.
Yeah.
The chairman's a great guy to talk to because he's a mathematician.
Oh,
so
you got on like house on fire then.
We were talking about the Enigma code, and he was very knowledgeable on how it's spoken. But he didn't know about Watson, the post office engineer, who told them to leave all the valves in with the first computer, Colossus.
Really?
Why? The Colossus computer to break the Enigma code kept breaking down. I think his name was Tommy Flowers, who was a post office engineer. He said, no, you keep turning on and off. You've got all these valves, one breaking down, will actually mean the machine doesn't work. Leave them on. Well, with a filament in a bowl, the old-fashioned bowl.
Oh, okay.
it stresses it.
Yes.
And by that, he got about 5 times or more of life out of it.
Yeah.
And the chairman of Towers Watson, he saw it immediately. He said, of course. That first early computer, and I think the second one they were making literally as they're landing on D-Day.
No pressure then.
They had a flood in the room, so they were standing with all this electricity in Wellington boots, putting them together because they couldn't find a plumber.
This is not the high level data science that we
No,
to see.
No, quite incredible story.
I love it. So are you a glutton for punishment? Because after Saville Consulting, now Saville Assessment, after SHL, you've come back for more with 10x Psychology. What is 10x Psychology?
Well, I met Ollie Anderson, who's a mathematician, and then also a master's in biometrics, and unusually a master's in HR, who had this idea of a dashboard where we could hold aptitude tests, personality, motivation, well-being, engagement, 360, structured interviews, all on one central dashboard rather than separate places, and use machine learning and predictive analytics. So I produced another questionnaire and I made some tweaks to it, which I learned from the OPQ and WAVE, made it quicker. And actually the evidence is, we've just produced a manual, that it's actually got validity which is higher than WAVE and the OPQ.
Wow. And it's online data,
it's
on
all
an online platform.
But the beauty for HR is you've got all this information in one central place.
Nice.
So it's on the individuals rather than all be in different places. And also what we're doing, we've got embedded validation. It's always worried me that people get a report on the OPQ on WAVE, but two people will interpret it in different ways.
Yes.
If someone's highly assertive, someone say, oh, they shows he's got drive, or she's got drive, or it might be, oh, he's bossy.
Yeah.
So because you've got that that questionnaire, you might find two different psychologists or HR people interpreting different ways. So what we're doing is embedding validation, and actually finding, in fact, which one of characteristics do predict in different jobs. And what we're finding is, of course, that in different jobs, personality characteristics tend to predict given competencies very well. To expect one questionnaire to predict across all jobs, other than perhaps conscientiousness, is unlikely. But, things like creativity may be important in media, but less important in an air traffic controller.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. There was a moment in the book where you had, I think you'd given a talk or a training session, and a senior manager was, furious with you almost, was quite antagonistic, and she was arguing against the process. And so you, I think, sat with her and took her through her own assessment results. I forget if it was the OPQ or something, but it changed her thinking almost at once in that one session. That's the power of these sort of assessments. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I mean, as a structure, indeed, in counselling or developing people, much more use of that is made now than used to be. And I've also made the point in the book you were talking about that very often people are tested. You've got all that information on them. It's filed away and not used. So what we're also doing is we're putting learning and development interventions onto that platform, so that they can access themselves, areas which are important to their job, where they may wish to improve or learn more.
That's very clever.
Right. So so this is all Ollie Anderson's idea. I just write the songs, so to speak.
I think it's the way of the future, using that data, and not just data, but live data. I know there's
absolutely
a previous guest on the podcast, Score, where they take sales data from retail stores across the country, pull it in, and connect it to the HR systems, and say, well, they are not selling enough of this product, so maybe we need some sales training on this. Live data, and it's a completely different area, but I love the fact that it's taking it online. And really creating a learning development plan out of that. And it sounds like what you're building there with 10x Psychology.
That's what we've done. That's what we do.
That's brilliant. What's your advice to other businesses in the broad human resources industry on how to grow a successful HR-related business? Because you've done it several times. So what's your advice to them?
A successful HR-related business?
Yeah, whether that's a occupational psychology business or a recruitment firm. Do you have any general advice on how they can take their business and turn it into real success, as you've done?
I think one thing I'd say is work hard. We talk about work-life balance, which is absolutely right that we should. But I mean, basically, early in my career, I was putting in over 100 hours a week to get those companies up and going.
That shone through in the book, I must say, and with Roger as well. He was
hard worker, yeah, definitely.
I think, if I recall, you were either seriously injured or ill and traveling around the world and still had to give a presentation to your biggest client. But yeah, the show must go on, as Freddie says. So
yeah, I think I got food poisoning from prawns in Thailand or something like that. The journey back was an absolute nightmare, I remember. But I still had to get back with all of that jet lag and the next day and get up and see one of the major clients in London.
Wow. So how do you marry the balance between that need for hard work and putting the hours and the time, and then getting the mental space, the mindset that is being discussed a lot more these days?
Well, for me, it was always sport. Basically, it was tennis. I enjoyed rugby, soccer mainly. I played a lot of squash as well, as my sons do as well.
Yeah.
So that was a great way of actually burning off the tension for me. It was getting out there on a soccer field with your friends who bring you back down to reality, effectively.
Yeah.
I don't play now. I miss it enormously, especially being a member of a team, defending for 89 minutes and getting a breakaway goal and winning 1-0. I love that.
Great feeling.
So that was my way of because it was always said it went around at the NFER on a Tuesday night, I would not do anything because I was football training, and that was it. In fact, when I first met Roger, he asked me to give a talk on the 16PF standardization in London. I gave my talk for an hour and a half and was questioned. Then I picked my bag up. I was running for the actual exit door, and he pulled me back and said, "No, you're on the question and answer panel at 3." I said, "No, I'm not. I got a kick
on the pitch.
I'm on the pitch at 3 o'clock in Wimbledon."
You answer them, yeah.
You answer them. I was off.
I love it. All right, so having an outlet is just hugely important. So it's a combination of putting the hours, the time, putting the hard work, whatever it takes almost. But having an outlet, whatever format that is, whether it's walks, whether it's listening to music, sport in your case.
And I don't know, it's about thinking outside the box, but sometimes thinking within the box. Sometimes just combining 2, 3, 4 things, together. I don't know if I was that original, but the idea of actually having, well, let's make the test less clinical and not have silly questions in it, like, would you rather be cripping or most of them, there's something wrong with our bowel movements and so on. So items like that question. It's literally in the MMPI being used. Yeah. They wondered why they got sued. But having relevant tests, making them short, making them attractive, doing the training well, and doing the consultancy to look at the competencies required for the job well. That combined formed a form of triangle, which we then expanded overseas, of course.
Yeah. So how far and wide did SHL go? Because you covered so much territory.
It's been said that 50 million of my tests are used a year.
50 million.
A year on people for development and selection. And it's been used in some 160 countries, like that, the OPQ.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I saw my country thanks to you, so thank you again. Tell us about your book, Testing Times, Psychologist at Work. Why did you write it, and when and where can people buy it?
Well, I've got 11-year-old twins. The boy Jack is mad on squash. He looks like he will do quite well at that. Like his half-brother William, who won the Surrey final a couple of years ago, and I was very keen on it. And Jack at 11 is being brought into the county squad. Nice. So I thought that when I went to Roger Holdsworth's funeral, his son Chris, who I knew from a young age, and such a great guy, actually said, "My father was abroad so much. I wish he'd made notes about where he'd been and written a book called I Remember. So I thought, well, in that case, let me try and get down what I did here, at least for them. So that was one of the main reasons.
Because there's some beautiful personal anecdotes and situations, just even funny stuff that isn't from the bright lights of the psychology world, but it just means something. It adds all that color. So I really enjoy it.
Right. Yes, I try to keep it funny with some of the anecdotes, but they were all true.
And for someone who's not from London, I did like all the little the meetings held in pubs where the Rolling Stones guitarist was hanging out, or the drummer, or whomever it was.
This was and Jimmy Page was at my school 2 years above me. But the woodwork master said he wouldn't get anywhere and took his car away. Clapton is from Ripley, which is only about 5 miles away, and Jeff Beck is from Sutton. Wow! So, and they used to meet up in Kingston upon Thames. Yeah, and a friend of mine, Terry Richards, I played football with, and knew them all well. Oh. And would go along and actually go out to parties with them and so on before they were known. In fact, where I live, literally 100 yards down the hill, is where one of the Beatles lived. Okay, so the Beatles came to live around this part of Surrey, including St George's Hill, which was where John Lennon lived for a while. So around here, you had Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck, and I'm the only person in the world who has answered a door with a man saying, "I want to pick up my son." I said, "Certainly, he's here. I'll go and get him," and didn't recognise it was Dave Gilmour of Pink Floyd, who I absolutely adore. Because a friend was there. He said, "Do you know who that was?" I said, "No, Dave Gilmour." I said, "Oh my God."
So it's guilt that you named a chapter in your book after one of their songs. Is that right?
Well, yeah, Uncomfortably Numb.
Uncomfortably Numb. Great song. I'm going to have to put it on after
this.
It's
more than that. There's one called Wish You Were Here. Which is probably my favourite song.
Yeah.
Beautifully simple, but beautiful song.
What an opening. Yeah. We've covered so much ground, and you've shared a brilliant story. When can people find your book, and where would they go to learn about the book and about 10X Psychology?
It'll be coming out the 10th of January. And that's when 10X Psychology will be making more of its services and products available as well.
Very cool. All right. So I'll share the links on the show notes. But Peter, thank you very much. And it's such an amazing story you've got. And there's still so much more to come. So thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you very much indeed.